over our budget for how we were going to pay on a medical assistant and quality assurance representative wages, $700 a month for daycare, $250 a month for student loans, $560 a month for health care that we couldn't even use because we had a $3,500 deductible. All any politician seemed to offer was a tax advantage healthcare savings account for us to save what money exactly? But I didn't make the connection. No one ever told me what was possible. I had never even heard of single-payer healthcare before 2015. I never considered that the government could simply forgive my college debt. I never questioned how we were paying for all these wars but couldn't provide young families childcare. I knew I was crying over the second child I'd never be able to afford. But before Bernie, I never questioned why. I thought it was my fault because they told me it was my fault for buying lattes. We thought it was our fault for eating avocado toast. We thought impending climate apocalypse was our fault because we didn't use the right kind of light bulbs. Now I know better, and now we all know better. I'm not going to sit here and take it when someone is mortgaging my child's life for a few more years of fossil fuel blood money. And in Bernie, and only Bernie, I see someone who worries about our future as much as I do. No matter what happens in this election, Bernie was the spark that started a fire and changed my world forever. Every day he continues to push my imagination of what's possible. For instance, we can just end right-to-work laws. I'm not going to take no, it's too hard. Our donors don't like it. It costs too much for an answer anymore. It costs too much not to fight climate change. It costs too much to not provide health care as a human right. Tell me, what exactly costs more than our very lives, our children's lives? But now I know, and it's too late, and they can no longer tell me that better things aren't possible. Better things are possible if you have someone willing to fight for it, and I'm gonna buy my damn latte.
Let us be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together. I've got some real estate here in my bag, so we bought a pack of cigarettes and Mrs. Wagner pies and walked off to look for America. Kathy, I said as we boarded a Greyhound in Pittsburgh, Michigan seems like a dream to me now. It took me 4 days to hitchhike from Saginaw. I've come to look for America. Laughing on the bus, playing games with the faces. She said the man in the gabardine suit was a spy. I said be careful, his bow tie is really a camera. Toss me a cigarette, I think there's one in my raincoat. We smoked the last one an hour ago. So I looked at the scenery. She read her magazine, and the moon rose over an open field.
please welcome to the stage Patrick Borjak.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Borjak Pinson, and I'm a Bernie Sanders volunteer. On most days, you'll find me knocking on doors, phone banking, volunteering at events, driving the motorcade, or at the very least having discussions with friends and strangers on Facebook, persuading them as to why Bernie Sanders should be our next president. And all this while I have 2 jobs. But I wasn't always a dedicated Bernie volunteer. In fact, until 4 years ago, I wasn't really that much into politics. I always voted, but that was about it. The first time I ever heard of Bernie Sanders was in 2015, shortly after he announced he was running for president. My wife told me that a friend of ours, David Johnson, was going to be hosting Bernie Sanders at his home in West Branch. I thought she was talking about former U.S. Representative Barney Frank. So I said, sure, let's go hear Barney talk. So as I'm waiting for Barney to take the podium, I find myself making small talk with a very nice lady standing next to me by the name of Jane Sanders. Yeah, Bernie's wife. In retrospect, I hope I didn't embarrass myself by asking her, isn't it exciting we get to hear Barney Frank speak? So after a few minutes, my friend hosting the event went to the podium and introduced Bernie. It wasn't exactly who I was expecting, but I decided to listen to him with an open mind and hear what he had to say. And as I listened to Bernie speak, I found myself nodding in agreement with every single thing that he said. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, why can't we have single-payer health care? Why can't we raise the minimum wage to a living wage? Why can't we make public colleges tuition-free? And this was happening with each of the points that he was rattling off. I had never experienced total agreement with a politician in my life. It had always been take the bad with the good or the lesser of 2 evils. So I went home and researched the man, expecting to learn that he's just another politician, talking the talk but not walking the walk. What I found is that Bernie Sanders is exactly the man he claims to be. It goes as far back as his college days when he helped organize sit-ins to protest discriminatory housing practices and when he chained himself in solidarity with African American women, resulting in his arrest. And of course, there's the videos. Scores and scores of videos. It almost seemed like for nearly every major blunder that the U.S. government made over the years, there's a video of Bernie trying to stop it. So I decided that I was going to caucus for Bernie, and that I was going to spread the word to my friends about why they should too. I became a keyboard warrior on Facebook and phone banked a little bit, but that was about it. In the end, Bernie almost won Iowa, and it made me wonder, could I have done more? And if so, could it have made a difference in Iowa? And had he won Iowa, could he have won the nomination? And had he won the nomination, would he now be our president? And I thought, was it my fault that we have Trump? Okay, so that's probably taking it a little bit too far. But having just one more volunteer on the ground can have such a big impact and should never be discounted. So now fast forward to today, and I can't help but be inspired by all the Bernie volunteers I see in central Iowa. Some of the people who inspire me the most is a group from Kansas City that regularly organizes trips here to volunteer. And they got me thinking, if they can regularly drive 6 hours round trip to volunteer for Bernie. Hello. Thank you. So it got me thinking, if they can regularly drive 6 hours round trip to volunteer for Bernie, why can't I volunteer for a few hours a week right here at home? I now regularly ask my local field organizer, Kyle, to send me lists of doors so I can canvass after my day job or before my evening and weekend job. I phone bank when I can. I've put up 5 Bernie for President yard signs on my lawn. It's a corner lot, so one sign won't do. Thankfully, my family's been very supportive through all of this, even agreeing to use our home as a staging location for the final January push before the February 3rd caucus. And that brings me to my final point. We're about to enter January, which means we've got 1 month before the Iowa caucus. This is it. It's crunch time. So here's my plea. If you're not a volunteer, now is the time. If you're just a keyboard warrior like I was in 2016, that's wonderful. Thank you for what you're doing. But now, please consider spending a weekend knocking on doors, phone banking, or texting. If you're already a volunteer, it's time to step up your game even more. I bet you'd make a great caucus captain or co-captain or ambassador. Don't leave this primary thinking, could I have done more to help Bernie? I encourage you to speak to any of the campaign staff here before you leave and find out what you can do personally to help. If we all put in our best efforts in this final push, I have no doubt that Bernie will win Iowa, win the nomination, and become President Bernie Sanders. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the next President of the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. And let me begin by thanking Natalie Harwood for her remarks and Patrick Borjak for his remarks. And let me get to the chase. I know the people of Iowa, as you all know, have a unique place in American politics. And what I have been very impressed about, having been through this state many, many times, is the seriousness and sense of responsibility which the people of Iowa, as people of New Hampshire as well, take. I suspect that a number of you who are here this morning have been to a number of meetings with other candidates trying to assess where they stand. That's exactly the right thing to do. You go first. You want to make sure that the choices you make are the best choices for you and your family. And America. And I want to tell you today why I think I am that choice. Our campaign is about two fundamental issues. Number one, the need to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country. And no matter what your political views are, and I know that not everybody in Iowa or America agrees with everything that I stand for, we want a president that when you and your kids are watching television, that you're not embarrassed by what you see on the screen. We want a president that you understand you may disagree with the president on this issue or that issue. That's called democracy. But we don't want a president who is a pathological liar. We may disagree on issues, but you do not want a president who very intentionally is trying to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation or our religion. I think the people of this country, regardless of their views on this or that issue, want a president to bring us together. want a president to understand that when we have disagreements, we debate those issues in a civil manner, that we're not a bully trying to insult and humiliate people who disagree with us. So our campaign is about beating Trump, but it is about more than beating Trump. Our campaign is about asking questions that many other campaigns do not ask. It's about thinking outside of the box. It's about remembering what Nelson Mandela, one of the great heroes of my lifetime, stated. And he said in a very profound remark, and I quote, "Everything is impossible until it happens." Everything is impossible until it happens. What does that mean? What does that mean? What it means is when we think back in American history, or we think about where we are today, there's always a consensus of what's normal, what's acceptable. And you think about the great struggles of American history. I'll just give you a few examples. 100+ years ago, women in America did not have the right to vote, okay? And the establishment consciousness of the time, shared by many, many people, was that, nothing personal, woman's place is in the home. Of course you can't get a higher education. Of course you can't vote because, politics is kind of complicated and you really don't understand the details of it. We all agree on that. That was the consciousness of the time. How did that consciousness change? It changed because women and their male allies stood up and fought back and demanded equality. We talk about slavery, the horrors, the abomination of slavery, segregation, and a consciousness that existed in many parts of this country about racial inferiority carried to its extreme by Hitler. Racial inferiority. Oh, the color of my skin is different than yours. I'm superior to you. And zillions of people believe that. But African Americans and their allies stood up and fought back. And it said, under God's eyes, we are all equal human beings and entitled to the same rights. And more recently in our lifetime, I'm a little older than some of you, and I remember this so clearly. My state of Vermont, has been one of the leaders in the country historically in gay rights. We're ahead of the curve. But I can remember, not so many years ago, as a United States congressman from Vermont, marching in parades at around the time in which Vermont was discussing gay rights. Big issue in the legislature. And having people at the sidelines yelling out horrible, horrible phrases. In fact, awful stuff in my own state, which was a leader in the country. And if you think back 30 or 40 years ago, if anybody in this room were to say that gay marriage would be legal in every state in this country, nobody in this room would have believed that. Nobody would have. But what happened was that the gay community and their straight allies stood up and fought back and said that in America, every person, regardless of their sexual orientation, has the right to love whoever they want. And you think back, and what I'm talking about here is not gay rights. I'm not talking about civil rights. I'm not talking about women's rights. I'm talking about how consciousness changes. And if you think back on workers' rights, 150 years ago, the understanding was, I'm a boss, you are the worker. You will do what I say. 7 days a week, you're fired. I don't like your religion, you're fired. I am the boss. That's the end of the discussion. But workers stood up and they formed unions. And they said to their bosses, sorry, we're not animals, we are human beings. You will treat us with respect and dignity. We will engage in collective bargaining. And some of those workers were killed. Some of those workers were jailed. Some of those workers had their lives destroyed because they stood up for workers' rights. Now, what is my point? How does this get back to Mandela? What we have got to do is ask ourselves, where are we now in this moment in history such that 100 years from now, people will look back and say, I can't believe that was going on. I can't believe it. We accept it, but 100 years from now, we want our grandchildren and great-grandchildren to look back and say, I can't believe that. In the same way that if you try to explain, a mom explains to a daughter that 100 years ago women didn't have the right to vote, the daughter may say, come on, that's absurd. Where are we now? Where we are right now is that we have 3 people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Where we are right now, while 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%, we got 500,000 people, including 30,000 veterans, who are sleeping out on the streets or in emergency shelters tonight. Where we are today is that in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people, including people in this room, are living paycheck to paycheck. You know what that is? I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. I know what it is, and many of you know what that is. And what that means is that if your car breaks down and you don't have the $500 to get it repaired, you're not going to be able to get to work. And if you can't get to work, you don't have an income. You don't have an income, you can't feed your kids. What it means is if you are 55 years old, you're one of tens of millions of Americans who have nothing in the bank as they approach retirement, and they are scared to death about that. What that means, if you are in Iowa, you're a woman I met in Des Moines a month ago who makes $10.20 an hour, has 3 kids, and can barely feed her kids. That's what it means. My view, and I know your view, is that in the richest country in the history of the world, we must create an economy that works for all of us, not just the wealthiest people. In America today, we all understand how important education is. Right? Everybody knows how important education is. And Iowa, actually, historically, has been one of the leaders in public education in this country. And yet, right now, and again, I'm thinking, think forward 100 years. Look back to where we are right now. Psychologists tell us that the most important years of human development are 0 through 4. Okay? And that the best investment, you're going to invest $1 in the federal level or state level, the best investment you can make for the future of this country is investing in the little children. When you invest in the young children, they do better in school, less likely to drop out, more likely to become productive members of our society. Everybody knows that. There's not a debate. And yet we have a dysfunctional child care and pre-K system, which means that in Vermont and in Iowa, it is virtually impossible for a working-class family to find the high-quality, affordable child care their children need. That ain't right. But again, I'm asking you to think outside of the box. Everybody understands how important early education is. And we are failing and failing abysmally. We have child care workers who are earning less than McDonald's workers. That is crazy stuff. If you love this country, you love the children. And if you love the children, we make sure that all of our kids have quality, affordable childcare. Same thing for public education in general. You know, recently some of you may have read that there are Major League Baseball players who signed contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, it's great for them. And yet, there are teachers in America who go to work in their first contract making less than $30,000 a year. If we believe in education, if we believe in our children, we must attract the best and the brightest into education. I want to see the day come when young people in college are saying, I am so excited because I'm going to be doing the most important work in America, educating our kids, and I'm looking forward to becoming a teacher. So it is not a radical idea to say that we should be paying all of our teachers in America at least $60,000 a year. That we should triple funding for low-income Title I schools. And again, think ahead 100 years and look back. If we all understand how important education is, then we have got to make every kid and every parent in America know that if their kid does well in school, they will be able to get a higher education. That's why we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now, people say, Bernie, that's a nice idea. How are you going to pay for it? And this is, again, requires thinking outside of the box. We have become used to governments that give massive tax breaks to people who don't need it and then ignore the needs of working families. 11 years ago, as all of you will remember, Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who nearly destroyed our economy. 2 years ago, unbelievable, after Donald Trump said, well, my tax plan is for the working families, 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%, and large profitable corporations received massive tax breaks. Well, if we could do that, you know what else we could do? We can cancel all student debt in America. And when we look forward 100 years from now, and I want people to look back, I want your grandchildren to be saying, Grandma, Grandpa, don't tell me there was ever a time in America when people couldn't go to the doctor when they were sick. Don't tell me that the cost of health care was so high that people actually died because they couldn't afford the health care that they needed. Again, take a step back. Take a look at what is going on around you today. In America today, we are spending twice as much per person on health care as the people of any other nation. Twice as much, 18% of our GDP. And yet, 87 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. And we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. It is my view, and it is the view of the majority of people in this country, that health care is a human right, not a privilege. The function of a rational healthcare system is not to make $100 billion in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies, which is what occurred last year. The function of a rational healthcare system is to provide quality care to all in a cost-effective way. And that is why, as President of the United States, in my first week in office, I will introduce Medicare for All single-payer legislation. And I want to say a word about that because the healthcare industry will be spending tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in opposition. Trump and the Republicans will be doing everything they can to lie about what Medicare for All means. And in fact, we will be opposed by the Democratic establishment as well. All right, so I want to tell you what Medicare for All is. I'm the guy who wrote the damn bill, so. What does it mean? Here's what it means in concrete terms. Number one, before we get into Medicare for All, we got to think, how are we paying for health care today? How do we pay for health care? We've had meetings all over Iowa, all over this country, asking people. You know, people telling me, well, Bernie, I'm spending $15,000 a year on premiums, spending $12,000 on premiums. Oh, I got an $8,000 a year deductible. Oh, my God, my prescription drug bills are off the chart. Out-of-pocket expenses right and left. I got sick and I was in the wrong network, and then I had to pay out of my own pocket, so forth and so on. Right now in America, and I want everybody to hear this because you're not going to hear it from my opponents. If you are in private insurance and you are the average family in America, right in the middle of our economy, you make about $60,000 a year. You are paying $12,000 a year on average for your health care. 20% of your income. Some people are paying more, some people are paying less. That is a huge amount. So before people ask me, Bernie, how are you going to fund Medicare for All, which is a fair question, how are we paying for it today? And I'll tell you how else. Well, let me ask you a question. Tell me about premiums right here, right now. What are you paying in premiums? Anyone want to volunteer? Don't be shy. Yes, ma'am. All right. Family of four, $1,800 a month. That's $20,000 a year. That's how we are paying for it right now. Do you have any deductible?
Both the employer and employee.
Okay.
We pay both the employer and the employee part of that. That's why it's
You're
a little more.
self-employed?
My husband's in private practice.
Yeah. All right. All right, that's one way. Who else wants to? Yes, ma'am.
I'm on Medicare.
Yes.
And I pay 140 Part B, like 40 to 50 prescription, and 130 or 40 supplemented, which goes up every year.
So that's $3,000 or $4,000 despite being on Medicare. You're paying.
Yeah, and what I understand is that will go away.
Of course, I'm going to explain that. Yes. Okay. But what I want to first establish now, it is a very fair question to ask me how you pay for Medicare for All, because we all know health care is not free. And I'm not here to tell you that it's free. We got to pay for it. But this is how we're paying for it right now. There's a family out there that pays, I'm guessing, $20,000, $30,000 a year. A woman on Medicare, over 65, paying $3,000 a year out of her own pocket. Who else wants to tell me about premiums? Yes, sir. Stand up if you could, please. Misty, get the mic.
Sure, about $700 only
month?
premiums.
A month.
Yes.
All right, that's $10,000 a year, $9,400 a year. And you got any deductibles or out-of-pocket expenses?
Yes, yeah. The deductible covers, you pay 100%, so $3,300. And then after you meet it, then it covers 80%, I believe. So
Right.
you still have, and there's, I'm not sure what the out-of-pocket is.
Right.
It's either 10 to 15 grand.
Okay. Who else wants to talk about premiums, deductibles? Yes, ma'am. Get a mic.
My baby's 9 months old here. I'm still paying the hospital bills for him. And we have health insurance. My husband works full time. Our deductible is $8,700 a year.
Is this for the birth of the baby?
This baby right here.
You're paying,
I'm
still
still
paying
paying
off
him
the
off.
birth of that baby?
I'm still paying him off.
Okay. Well, he's a beautiful baby. He's worth paying off. But help me out here. Your quote-unquote illness is that you were pregnant and you had a baby. Is that your illness? Okay. And you had a deductible and you had to pay $8,700 for the birth of the baby. Okay. Okay, premiums, what about deductibles? What deductibles do people have, ma'am? You got a mic?
I'm still paying for a lumpectomy I had in April.
Okay. Deductibles? No, I want to say a word about the current system. And I'm not going to keep you here 5 hours to talk about it. Because it's a system that gets me really upset. And I do this every day, talk to groups of people, and it still gets me upset. Because of its dysfunctionality and its cruelty. It's cruelty. Yesterday I was in New Hampshire, and just same question, how do you pay for health care? Some guy gets up, I guess 35 years of age, just tell you how we're paying for health care. I don't have any health insurance. That's how we're paying for it. And I'm scared to death that I'm going to get sick, and when I do get sick, I pay it out of my own pocket, and I can't afford that. That's how he is paying for health care. In America today, despite spending twice as much as the people of any other country, we have 30,000 Americans die each year because they don't go to a doctor when they should. And that should not shock anybody. If you're a working class person and you don't have any money in the bank and you get sick, what happens? You can't afford to go to the doctor, and you hope and you pray that your symptoms will get better. Maybe they don't. And then 6 months later, you go crawling into a doctor's office, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, your situation is terminal. 30,000 people die unnecessarily each year. And I want to say something else which I had not fully understood until the last year. And that is that 500,000 Americans go bankrupt because of medically related illnesses. All right? Now, I want you to think about that. And again, I want you to try explaining this to your grandchildren in the future. That you lived in a healthcare system where you went bankrupt because you were diagnosed and treated with cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's. How grotesque and cruel is that? Now, we understand. You want to play the stock market, you want to get into real estate, you make an investment, it's a risky investment, you lose, you go bankrupt, too bad. You want to buy a house that you can't afford, you go bankrupt, too bad. You should not go bankrupt in America because you are struggling with cancer. That is disgusting. So I just wanted to spend that minute, with your help, talking about how we pay for health care today. It is fair to ask me how I'm going to pay for it. That's fair. But it is also fair for my opponents to explain to the people in this room why it is just and right that people are paying $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year for health care today when they cannot afford that outrageous cost. All right, so what is Medicare about? Medicare for All do? What is it about? Let me get right down to the gist of it. Number one, we eliminate all premiums for workers and their employers. Gone. All right? Number two, we eliminate co-payments so that people will be able to go to the doctor even if they don't have that $50 or $100 they need as a co-payment. Number three, and again, I want you to think outside of the box and try to explain this one to your grandchildren. We end the insanity of a concept called deductible. Now, we take deductibles for granted. We've been dealing with them for years. Hey, what's your deductible? I know. It is an insane concept. What insurance is supposed to be about, you got insurance, you pay for it, you go to the doctor when you need to. Well, not quite. Because now you're going to have to pay the first $5,000, $10,000, whatever it may be, out of your own pocket. What happens if you don't have that money? You don't go to the doctor and you get sicker. We are going to eliminate all deductibles. We are going to eliminate all out-of-pocket expenses. We are going to, and I can go on for about 4 hours on this one, but I know you got to. We are going to take on the greed and corruption underlying corruption of the pharmaceutical industry. Who, by the way, are paying for the ads you're seeing on television. All right? Pharmaceutical industry charges you and you and you the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Some of you may recall a number of months ago, I went from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario, in order to buy insulin for people who have diabetes. That's their life. That's what they need to stay alive. Who knows what the cost of the same exact insulin product in Canada was compared to the United States? Do we know? One time, that's right. People in the United States are paying 10 times more for the same exact product made by the same company. You know how that happens? It gets to a whole other issue. It happens because the drug companies have spent $4 billion on lobbying and campaign contributions over the last 20 years, and they have bought the leadership of the Republican and Democratic parties. You want to hear about dysfunctionality and insanity? People get sick. You get sick, you go to the doctor. You go to the doctor says, Joe, you have this illness, I'm writing you a prescription. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescription their doctors write. Old people in Vermont and in Iowa cut their pills in half because they cannot afford the high cost of medicine. Under Medicare for All, because we are going to take on the drug companies and make sure that in America we don't pay the prices any higher than any place else in the world, nobody will pay more than $200 a year for prescription drugs. All right, so we're eliminating premiums, copayments, out-of-pocket expenses, deductibles. No one pays more than $200 a year. How do we pay for it? Healthcare is an expensive proposition, and I'm not going to come before you because you wouldn't believe me if I did and say healthcare is free. Healthcare is pretty expensive. We got to pay for it. We pay for it in a number of ways, but the most important way that we pay for it is by saying to the American people, you will pay 4% of your income in healthcare with an exemption of the first $29,000 of income. All right? So what that means, I want to go through the arithmetic with you. Not free. But what it means, if you're that average family in the middle of the American economy, you're making $60,000 a year. We're exempting the first $29,000, at least $31,000 of taxable income times 4% is a little bit over $1,200 a year for comprehensive health care. How's that? And by the way, Medicare is a good program, but it is not good enough. I want to make it stronger. As this woman just indicated, you could be on Medicare. You still have to pay thousands of dollars a year, all right, through supplements. So what do we do with Medicare? We expand Medicare to cover dental care, to cover hearing aids, eyeglasses, and I'll tell you what else we cover, which is enormously important. A real gap in our healthcare system right now. We cover home health care. And we cover home health care because a lot of older people and people with disabilities would prefer to stay home if they could rather than go into a nursing home. All right? So I told you how for working people we're going to pay for Medicare for all. And let me just say this, that in this country, over our history, the idea of health care for all is truly not a new idea, not an idea that I invented by any means. Teddy Roosevelt, over 100 years ago, talked about it. FDR talked about it in 1930s and 40s. Harry Truman talked about it. Kennedy talked about it. Lyndon Johnson talked about it and did something about it. Jimmy Carter talked about it, Obama talked about it, not a new idea. But despite all of the talk, we have not done what every other major country has done because of the incredible power of the drug companies and the insurance companies. For them, the current healthcare system is working just great. 6 drug companies made $69 billion in profits, pay their CEOs outrageous compensation levels. I believe that after 100 years of talk about healthcare as a human right, now is the time to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. This is not going to be easy. I'm not here to tell you this is easy. There is a reason why we pay twice as much per capita as do the people of any other country. There is a reason why the drug companies, the insurance companies, make huge profits. They own a lot of politicians. They have unlimited amounts of money to put ads on TV. This is going to be a tough fight. But I think the American people now understand the dysfunctionality and the cruelty of the current system. They are prepared to stand up and fight, and I am more than ready to lead that fight. And I want to say I've been going on for too long already. That's a tendency that I have. All right. I want to say a word about a few other issues. 4 years ago, when I was here in Iowa, and I want to thank all of the people of Iowa for the wonderful support we got 4 years ago, I was asked about climate change. And I said, you know, I see climate change as one of the great crises facing the planet. When I was asked, I was in a debate. The moderator said, Senator, what do you think the major, most severe national security issue facing the country is? And the moderator expected me to say, you know, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever, Russia, China. And I said, climate change. And at that point, people said, a little bit crazy. People are not saying that today. And I'll tell you why. I don't want to get people too nervous. But what the scientists are now telling us is that they have underestimated the severity, the speed, and the degree to which climate change is ravaging our planet. They have underestimated the speed in which the polar ice caps are melting, the ocean is warming. They have underestimated the extreme weather disturbances that we are seeing, underestimated the level of drought and flooding and disease that it will take place. So all I will tell you is the following, is that this planet, not just the United States, but our entire planet faces what we call an existential crisis. If we allow things to go along their merry old way, the scientists tell us that the planet Earth will be about 7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by the end of this century. I want you to appreciate this. Climatologists look at climate. They're not the weathermen telling you whether it's going to snow tomorrow. They are looking at climate over a period of millions or hundreds of millions of years, the changes that take place. We are seeing changes in our climate with our own eyes in our own lifetime. And think about, if these trends continue, what this planet will look like to your kids, your grandchildren, and future generations. Now, I have been criticized because I have come up and proposed the most sweeping climate change legislation ever brought forth by a candidate for federal office. And my critics, of which there are many, say, Bernie, your proposal is very expensive. And I concede it. It is, although we pay for it. It is a very expensive proposal. But I want each and every one of you to think for a moment. If the scientists are right, and unlike Trump, I actually believe in science. If the scientists are right, you tell me what the alternative is to spending the money we need to save the planet. How much is too much to make sure that our kids and grandchildren have a planet to live in which is healthy and habitable? And I think that we have got to do all that it takes. That's what we've got to do. We have a moral responsibility. It's a beautiful young boy who's being paid for right now, right? We're going to pay for that kid. But I want that beautiful little boy to grow up in a world that is healthy and is habitable. What even complicates this issue more is not just the need to take on the fossil fuel industry. You know what? This is not an American issue. This is a global issue. We are going to have to reach out to the people in China, no matter what their government may or may not believe, Russia, India, Pakistan, Brazil, countries all over the world. And my dream, and I know this is dreaming big, but maybe we're running out of options here. We've got to dream big. And that is to tell the world, under American leadership here, leading the world, that if we are currently spending $1.8 trillion a year, $1.8 trillion on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other. Russia just came up with a new faster missile system. $1.8 trillion a year. That maybe, just maybe, instead of doing that, we should pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. So thank you. You know, these issues, these are huge issues. And the only way we are going to address them is by ending the divisiveness in this country and bringing our people together in common purpose. I wanted to say, let me conclude, and we'll open up to some questions and comments. Why do I think that I am the strongest candidate to beat Trump? I'll tell you why. I know many of my Democratic opponents. I've known them for years, and some of them are friends. And you're never going to hear me disparage, make ugly remarks about them. They're good people. And I do not believe that I'm the only candidate able to beat Trump. I just think I am the strongest candidate to beat Trump, which is what we need right now. I think it has to do with a couple of basic reasons. Number one, and I want to be clear about it, defeating Trump is not going to be easy. Yes, he is a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and a xenophobe and a religious bigot. Yeah, he is running a corrupt administration. Yes, he lies all of the time. But the truth is he has a solid base of support. For whatever reason, he has a solid base of support. The only way, in my view, that we defeat Donald Trump is when we have the strongest, largest voter turnout in the history of this country. There are millions of working people and young people who have not been engaged in the political process. I believe that our campaign and our agenda is the campaign to bring those people into the political process. Number two, I believe that we have a record that will resonate with working families all over this country. I don't want to be boastful here, but I have spent my entire life fighting for working families. I come from the working class, and I will be a candidate and a president of the working class of this country. And that means that unlike some of my opponents, I did not vote for disastrous trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China, which cost us millions of jobs. I did not vote and support, in fact, I vigorously opposed the horrendous war in Iraq, the worst. I did not vote and support a terrible bankruptcy bill, which has been horrific for many working families in this country. And I say all these things not just to talk about policy differences, but to talk about how we engage with working families, to make it clear that our record, which is virtually 100% pro-work or pro-union voting record after 30 years in Congress, is the campaign that will resonate with working families, bring people out to vote, and defeat Trump. And lastly, to defeat Trump, you're going to need a very strong grassroots organization. That's the way it is. And that's what our campaign is about. I'm proud to tell you, and I really am, we don't have a super PAC. I don't go running to wealthy people's homes to raise large sums of money. And yet, despite that, we have now, as of today, received more contributions from more Americans than any candidate in the history of American politics. And that is more than just, I mean, the average contribution is all of $18, or I hear we're edging up to 19 now, I don't know. Some big contributors contributed $30, and now we're on our way to 19. But I say that not just from a money perspective. Money is obviously important in politics, but I think it is a degree, an indication of the kind of grassroots support that we have. Here in Iowa, New Hampshire, all over this country, we have God knows how many volunteers knocking on doors, making the telephone calls, and that is what we need to defeat Trump. We need a campaign and a candidate who says it clearly, that he will stand with the working families of this country, that he is prepared to take on the greed and corruption of the billionaire class. That's what this campaign is about. So let me conclude just saying this. Real change in America never takes place from the top on down. It is always from the bottom on up. I'm a United States Senator. I deal with the 1%, and I deal with Wall Street. I deal with the insurance companies, the drug companies, the military industrial complex. I deal with these people every single day. They have enormous power. They have unlimited amounts of money, and I use the word unlimited. Most people who live in normal budgets don't know what unlimited is about. It means they spend as much as they want, and it doesn't matter because they have an endless supply of money. They are enormously powerful. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. We are 99%. And if we do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation, if we stand together and fight for an agenda that works for all, not just the very rich, we will not only win this election, we will transform America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think we got a couple of microphones here. We have time for a few questions. Where are we? Where are the mics? Okay, Misty, I think we have a very pretty Save the Children t-shirt there. Okay, good.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Welch. And
Tiffany, hold that mic to your mouth.
Is that better?
Yes.
Perfect. So I volunteer with Save the Children Action Network, and the reason I volunteer with Save the Children is because, for many reasons, but my main reason is because of childcare. I had to quit a job that I loved because after making it work with my first son, my childcare costs were taking 2/3 of my paycheck. Will you commit, and you've heard this again and again, I appreciate your making childcare a priority. Will you commit to making childcare access, universal childcare access, one of your first 100 days priorities?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, I think as you heard a moment ago, that was one of the very first things that I talked about. I mean, think about, tell you a brief story if I might. Some years ago, I was giving a speech somewhere in Washington on child care. And the staff drafted up something for me, and they said, X% of working mothers with kids under 6, or X% of mothers with kids under 6 are working. And I said, this is crazy. Get your facts right. Go back and research it. Turned out it was exactly right. I don't know the exact number. 70, 80% of moms with kids under 6 are working. And yet we maintain a mentality in America like we're back in the 50s. You know, dad goes to work and mom stays home with the kids. That ain't the case. So if dad is working and mom is working, what happens to the children? And what happens too often in America is either people are spending a huge proportion of their income for child care, or the quality care they're getting for their kids is not adequate because their child care workers are untrained and not providing the quality care that they need. So if we appreciate and love the kids, if we understand that 0 to 4 are the most important years, yes, we will have universal, affordable, high-quality child care in America. Okay, other questions? I see a hand back there. Yes, the woman, yeah.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Monaco. I'm here partly because my children, ages 12 and 14, have donated some of their allowance to your campaign. They really want Bernie to be president because number one is climate change. The other concern that they have is safety in school. I know you haven't talked about that today, but could you please tell us?
It was on my list, but I went on too long for healthcare, so thank you for answering. I will tell you, obviously, in Iowa, New Hampshire, Vermont, all over this country, the issue of gun safety is something that people feel very, very strongly about. And I will tell you a story. I think we were in New Hampshire, and a woman said, Bernie, what am I supposed to tell my 11-year-old daughter who wants me to buy her a bulletproof backpack? So when we talk about gun safety, we're not just talking about the horrible numbers of people who get killed because of guns or the mass shootings that we have seen. We are, of course, talking about that. But what Stephanie raises is another issue, and that is my grandchildren, like your kids, I suspect, undergo these what they call shooting drills or something like that. How terrible is that? What does that mean to the psyche of kids who walk into school who are afraid? You know, when we were kids, we went to school to study, to socialize, to do what we did, but you didn't go into school to be afraid. And that we have so many kids who are fearful now is just a terrible, terrible thing. So this is what I will say about gun safety. Number one, our administration will make gun safety laws based on what the American people want and need, not the power of the NRA. Trump and his Republican friends, quite frankly, are intimidated by the NRA, and that's about it. So we can't do anything. But once we get past that, then we can sit down and move forward. And I think there is growing support between gun owners, non-gun owners. I come from a very rural state. People live in states like Vermont. People live in Los Angeles and New York City. There is a growing understanding that what do we need to do? We need expanded and universal background checks, right? You got a history of violence, guess what? Sorry, you're not owning a gun. We need to do away with the so-called gun show loophole, all right? We need to do away with something called the straw man provision, which enables you to walk into a gun show, do a background check, buy guns legally, and sell those guns to criminal elements. And I'll tell you where the American people are now, where they weren't 5 years ago. The American people believe what I have believed for many decades, is that we have got to ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. So your question is a good one. It is on the minds of everybody. It is a difficult issue, but it is an issue we cannot run away from. We have got to do everything we can to protect the children, to protect Americans from the assaults we are seeing in terms of gun violence. Thanks for the question. Okay. Yeah, right here.
I'm coming, Doc.
Good morning, Senator. I'm not going to ask a question about Medicare for All. Thank you for going in detail on that. I want to ask you something. I've been an adjunct professor since my wife died, and a recurring assistant professor, visiting assistant professor, academic sharecropping. After you visited my former colleagues and students at Simpson College, two of my former colleagues wrote a letter to the editor in the Des Moines Register stating that free public college for all would harm private colleges. Could you detail, sir, how it will not?
Thank you very much. When I talk about funding of higher education, I talk about making public colleges and universities tuition-free, talk about canceling all student debt. What we also are going to put a great deal of emphasis on is greatly expanding Pell Grants, which right now are no longer covering anywhere near the needs of young people who are in college. You want to go to a private college? That's fine. That's your business. I want to make sure that you can afford to go to that college and not leave school deeply in debt. We also greatly expand work-study programs. So tell folks at any private college in America that on our higher education proposal, we're going to make higher education, private colleges or public education, affordable in this country. Okay, I see a hand right there. Yeah, we got a mic. There it comes.
Hello, Senator Sanders. My name is Katie, and I'm a student at Drake University, and I am a really big fan of pretty much all of your proposals. However, I do have one concern, and that is that our country's national debt has been growing basically every year. What will you do to try to decrease the national debt?
Good. That's a very fair question, and you're right. Under Trump, I think we are looking at a record-breaking deficit this year, may hit $1 trillion. Here's what we do. When you look at national debt, you have got to also look at the need for progressive taxation. Right now, we have the absurd situation where the richest people in this country are paying an effective tax rate of less than what middle-class people are paying. And that's simply because of the power of the wealthy and large corporations. So what we are going to do in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, where you have major corporations like Amazon not paying a nickel in federal taxes, income taxes, we are going to have a tax system and a wealth tax, which says to the wealthiest people in this country, sorry, you are going to start paying your fair share of taxes. And that is how we are going to deal with rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, building the affordable housing that we need, and also beginning to deal with the soaring national debt that we have. Okay. Okay. Yeah, gentleman right there. Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, first of all, let me say happy Hanukkah.
Thank you very much.
Secondly, let me say that our prayers and thoughts are with you for what has happened in New York.
Thank you.
And also to those in Texas. My question, and I appreciate you talking about young people. My question is twofold. You talked about the guns and that type of thing. I really would like for you to address about the issue of the trauma that children who are survivors of shooters, survivors of the ones that have survived the mass shootings. And secondly, an issue that we're not talking about in this nation is the sex and human trafficking of our babies. And those are things that we need to address if we're talking about saving the babies. The focus has to be there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question and very important issue. I mean, I think everybody understands there are so many issues out there. We can go on for 14 hours and not cover them all. You raised a question. The first issue was, we talk about gun violence and we mourn those who lost their lives, but I have met some of the survivors. One case, a guy in a wheelchair, and they are going through hell themselves. What has enormously impressed me, if I may say this, is that in some cases, especially in Parkland, Florida, all right, that terrible, terrible shooting at the high school there, what was unbelievable is these kids who survived stood up and said, you know what, we are heartbroken about the deaths of our student friends and our teachers, but we are going to use this moment to fight back, okay? We're not taking this lying down. We have suffered a terrible tragedy. We're going to tell the world about what we experienced, and we're going to stand up and fight for sane gun safety legislation. And they stood up in Florida, and I've met them in Washington. They are going all over this country. And to the degree that we are having some modest success in passing gun safety legislation, a lot of those young people are responsible for that. And lastly, I mean, in terms of your other question, sex trafficking is, what word can we use? It is disgusting, it is unacceptable. And our administration will do everything that we can to protect those young people in every way that we can. We will not tolerate sex trafficking in America. Okay, ma'am. Okay, Mike.
Good morning. I'm Sally Frank. How do you address the violence in schools without increasing school resource officers, thereby increasing the jail to prison pipeline and mass incarceration?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways that we do that. What we do is, first of all, we make sure that people do not have guns who should not have guns. It's not just a question of school shootings. School shootings are terrible. Las Vegas, which was the worst gun shooting disaster, took place from outside of a hotel window. So we have got to do everything that we can. And in terms of schools, of course, we have to do everything that we can to make sure that our kids are safe. And in terms of the pipeline from schools to jail, we are going to do everything that we can to end that pipeline in 100 different ways. We're going to be investing in our young people, in jobs and education, not more jails and more incarceration. Okay, right here, yeah.
Welcome back, Bernie.
Thank you.
There's some important dates that are coming up. And I want to let you know that your grassroots campaign is going to be here in Iowa and be here in New Hampshire and be here in Georgia and South Carolina and Nevada and Super Tuesday, because we're going to be supporting you when you are tied up in the Senate impeaching the President of the United States and removing him from office. The second most important date is February 3rd. That's Caucus Day. Every single one of you that are in this room today has got to bring a friend to caucus for Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Let me thank you on both counts. And look, that is the truth. I mean, the truth is that at the end of the day, what matters in the state of Iowa is showing up on February 3rd. And we don't know what the weather will be like. Iowa's like Vermont. The weather is not always sunny and warm. And the roads may be a little bit slippery. But Iowa has an oversized role in the American political process. And the gentleman is quite right. We need all of your help. All right, maybe one last question. Okay, ma'am, stand up. Here, mic is right there.
Hi, my name is Yasmin, and my question is about
Hold the mic closer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So my name is Yasmin, and my question to you is about your foreign policy. I was born and raised in Palestine, and I am a citizen of the United States. I would like, to know how would you try to handle the crazy things happening there, not only between the Israelis and Palestinians, but also with supporting the questionable dictatorship regimens rising in the region in surrounding countries. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To begin with, unlike Donald Trump, I believe that the United States must be a beacon of hope for people all over the world in terms of our defending democracy and human rights. Okay? Unlike Donald Trump, I will not be saying very kind things about authoritarian leaders all over the world and getting into fights with leaders of democratic countries. Number two, Israel-Palestine has been an issue for decade after decade after decade. And if I told you that there was going to be a simple solution to it, you wouldn't believe me, because there's not. But this is what I do believe. I believe it true of Israel and Palestine. I believe it true of Iran and Saudi Arabia, is that the United States must develop a foreign policy which is even-handed, And that means that instead of being pro-Israel all of the time, we have got to respect the rights and needs of the Palestinian people as well. And I will tell you, as you know better than I, that in areas like Gaza, you have youth unemployment of 60, 70%. People are unable to leave the region. It is a disaster, and it is unsustainable. There will be continued violence in that region. So as President of the United States, I will sit down with Israel, and I got real problems with the current leadership in Israel, sit down with the Palestinians, and I have problems with the leadership of the Palestinian community. But do our best to finally bring about a solution, but treat both Israelis who want and need and deserve peace and security, but also treat the Palestinian people with the respect and dignity that they deserve as well. All right. Look, let me thank you all. It's a great meeting, and I appreciate all of you for coming out. Let me conclude the way I began. People in the state of Iowa play an enormous role in the political process. I hope very much that what I've said today will suggest to you that maybe I am the best candidate to defeat the most dangerous president in American history. But what I also want to say to you, to be honest with you, is that I'm here today not only to ask for your support in the Iowa caucus. I will be back to you after we win the election. And I will be back in this sense. The message of our campaign is us, not me. And what that means is that no president, I'm the only candidate I think who will tell you this, no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone, all right? We are taking on in this campaign, not just Trump and the Republican Party. We're taking on Wall Street. We're taking on the insurance industry. You're taking on the pharmaceutical industry. You're taking on the military-industrial complex. You're taking on the fossil fuel industry. You're taking on the prison industrial complex. We're taking on the whole 1%. All right? That is a lot of power arrayed against us. And the only way that we win and transform this country is when millions of people, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, stand up and are prepared to fight for their kids, prepared to fight for their grandchildren, prepared to fight for this planet, prepared to fight for justice. And when we do that, brothers and sisters, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.